Um,
Woohoo!
yeah, let's rewind a little bit so that everyone listening has context.
Yeah.
I've been working through the book, An Introduction to Ecological Psychology, and trying to uh, put them into digestible videos on YouTube because I recognized, having spoken with a few people that watch my longer video, that it's a pain in the bum to say, hey, go watch this video, but watch timestamp 1 hour 13 to 1 hour 26. Or watch timestamp 42 minutes and 47 minutes, but then also listen to the bit at 1 hour 43 because it also relates. You're like, yeah, no thanks, not going to do that. So I'm breaking
Let
it
me
up.
let me introduce a brand new concept to you, which will change absolutely everything you believe in how we operate. But do it in this specific order. No, that's too much work.
Yeah. Or you could just say, hey, go watch this 2 hour video that would take you probably 10 hours to comprehend afterwards. So you watch the video and go, wait, what did he say? Did he really just say that? Yeah.
Wait, what was that? Say that again. Say that again. Say that again. Oh, say that again. Oh, say that again.
How does that make sense? But that doesn't work. That's not how science is done. That's not the assumptions that we hold. No. No, that's the point. Um But yeah, so I have been working my way through the book again, which is, we worked it out, third time running through. First time I read it was 23. Second time I read it was in 24 to do the video essay. It wasn't really a read through in that time. It was more of a, yeah, I don't need to talk about this stuff. Let's just talk about this stuff. Because if I had done a word for word read through, it would have been like 7 hours.
Yeah.
There's an audiobook for that. Go listen to the audiobook. This time I'm going through and I'm not missing bits out, but I'm explaining it in words that I would use.
Yeah.
So where you have the certain boxes, say instincts, I think I did a very quick run through on instincts in the original video, maybe like 2 or 3 sentences. Uh, these videos, they are 10 to 15 minutes long-ish, but it might be about 4 or 5 pages of a book. So one chapter might be split into two different videos of 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So it allows me to go a bit deeper, but also not as complex as some of the language used in the book, which I think is helpful. As when we spoke to Julie and Jeff, they pitched the book as an undergraduate book. I I feel like I'm still not talking to, I don't want to say regular people, but I'm not talking to people that aren't interested in learning about an alternative approach.
Yeah.
So they have likely read some research. I'm pre I'm guessing they've read things around long-term memory and working memory, and we perceive through visual perception with our eyes, and they have an understanding of what sensation and perception is, sort of like Sensation 101 kind of stuff from Andrew Huberman's work, or but literally anyone else's work in online. Maybe they know who Carl Friston is. So they've done some digging around, whether it's in cognitive psychology or learning science in some way. Maybe it's just like a Justin Sung video, and they've heard him talk about Bloom's taxonomy. It's something. Uh, but yeah, that's what I've started doing. And the book that you recommended to me, um, I had it a second ago. Where is it? There it is. It's under the other book. Activist Affordances. Not, yeah, not the other book that I'm reading. That one's open to chapter 5. No, that book, the Activist Affordances is open to in introduction chapter, and then I have the cognitive psychology book open at like page 300 and something. I don't know. Yeah, and then I have other books spread around. But yes, so that book I want to do in the same way.
Mm,
I wanted to get your thoughts on it. That was a very long preamble to what are your thoughts on this
cool.
book?
So I also have not got very far because I think I read the introduction because that was the PDF that I could download on my computer. So I was able to go through and just in Zotero and like highlight and go, ooh, 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 this is interesting, this is interesting. And then the free PDF ended, and I was like, ah, great, cool. I'll go buy the book, and then I'll sit and read it, and then I'll go through it, and then I never did because life, live. Um, Yeah, definitely. I'd be very intrigued to like hear your thoughts because it is definitely a opinionated book.
Yes, so even though I said I'm at the introduction, I have actually read the introduction and I've read parts of different bits of the book. This is going to sound really odd for people that read books. Maybe. I don't know. What I did is I read the introduction, then I skipped and opened the page at like chapter 3 or 4, read a couple of paragraphs in those pages, then went forwards and read a couple of paragraphs in different pages just to get a gist of what the book is roughly going to discuss. Obviously, had to look at some of the pictures. Uh, and
I looked into pictures.
Yeah, but then that's what you do as a kid. You like pick up your book, go, how many pictures are in the book? What are the pictures? And so yeah, I do it with academic papers, not pictures, but tables and figures. And so I went through, had a look, and some of the paragraphs that I read made me intrigued enough to want to read the book cover to cover.
Yeah,
Because there are things that are written that I don't agree with, but I would like to understand their perspective on it, and I think I need more context to understand where they're coming from. And there is a way that they're explaining the approach that has me questioning whether it's a mix and match discussion rather than an ecological approach. I listened to a podcast episode, what was it, yesterday? Well, it might have been technically today because it was at like 1 o'clock in the morning. So, however you want to classify that, I'm just looking at the back of the book. Yeah, when was this published? Um, oh, 2023. Okay, so it is fairly recent. Um, but yeah, I was listening to this podcast episode about the dualist approach between the ecological approach and contemporary traditional information processing, whatever you want to label the other approaches as. Um, uh, And again, it was sports coaching related, which is mildly irritating at this point because I'm taking a broader stance, and everyone just goes, "Oh yeah, 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 sports coaches." I'm like, I understand where you're coming from, but take 2 or 3 steps back, please. Which is why I've decided to move back from the sports coaching stuff because everyone that looks at this thing is just sport. If you're not interested in sport, it's really hard to apply it.
yeah.
Which is why the activist book is handy. But this dualist approach, they were saying you could take both approaches, but then you're not evidence based because you fundamentally can't take both approaches. You are one or the other, or you're not evidence based, and you're just you know these ideas exist and you do your own thing, which is totally valid. If you want to
Yeah.
know the ecological approach is a thing and the traditional approaches are a thing and they're different ways of explaining stuff, and then you do something else, kind of a mix and match, fine. But you can't say you're taking the ecological approach if you're doing stuff that doesn't match up with the ecological approach. You're not evidence based.
Mm.
You're evidence informed, not evidence based, which I find really useful. And some of the paragraphs that I read in this book without context made me think that they were evidence informed, not evidence
Yeah.
based,
Yeah.
which is why I'm intrigued.
I think that was another reason why I immediately bought the book for me was because I was like, what what is there? Because every single thing around ecological psychology has had to hit a bat on a ball. Like I'm
You've heard the baseball
generalizing
example a few times then.
how, but like it just like how to hit things and do like it's all very, very sport related. And I'm like,
How to
this is
kick, how to run,
fine.
how to wrestle, how to kick,
Yeah,
how to
it's like
catch, how to
this is
throw.
fine, but no.
I don't do.
Like, no, thank you. I would like to do something completely different. But what about this? And so I dived into it from like, okay, fine. What is the research? Is there any research that kind of combines disability and ecological psychology?
I mean,
And so I dived,
that question in its own, it's just
yeah,
like disability. What?
yeah, because I was like, okay, cool. Like the traditional term of disability, which is weird because, as you were saying there, disability is a weird one because I can adjust my environment to suit. Like, how do we explain that? That little that when I say that, that's intriguing. Like, how do we adapt our environment to suit the conditions of which our body is in? Like, what about that interesting information? What about that is what got me interested in the book and I want to have more time. Um, but I don't.
So if you can't read it by the time I get round to it, you might just end up watching my videos on it. Is that what you're saying?
If I have time to watch your videos, yeah. Even your videos are too long at the moment.
Really? They're 10 minutes.
Yeah. To be fair, I'm not even on YouTube. I
Oh
just
yeah.
don't. I just YouTube's not even open for me at the moment.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, you were saying?
But yeah, I wanted to find something that was talking about it from a completely different approach because I was tired of hearing about sport. Because everything I hear about is like, yeah, cool, but what about this? But what about my clients? What about my work in the world? Like, what about business? And then I look in the business sector, it's just like, no, I'll leave that one alone. Because it wasn't even, it was big businesses. It's like, yeah, but that's not useful and you don't even talk about it at all. So I'll just leave you. But it's like, well, what about disability? Disability. Um, and that was interesting. And so I found this. I was like, okay, cool, let's have a look at it. I think what I found intriguing, one of like the defining phases that they created was like the make up, make real, and make do with, which was like, okay, I don't know how I feel about all of that, but also yes, and I do agree it feels more informed versus evidence based because it there is justice even just in like the first I don't know 30 pages ish there are like so many things assumptions being made and that was like oh this is interesting enough for me to keep reading and then I just never was able to read.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. For me, the way they describe affordances is going to be critical in how I react to the book moving
Mm,
forwards. For those following the stuff that I'm doing on YouTube, I am at the affordance chapter to making a shorter video on. So I will probably do because I'm thinking of doing books in tandem because going through a 300 page book, page to page to page to page to page, is fine. I can do it. Just sometimes you need to step back and then come back in, which is why I'm doing article videos as well, some discussion videos, which I'm definitely going to get into later. I will probably title this podcast about it because it's heavy. It's about Mike Israel's drama. Have you seen any of that? You're not on YouTube, so I doubt it. No, I didn't think so. That's why I thought we'd do the preamble of the eco approach first. And yes, and then the Turvey book, which I mentioned, well, I say the Turvey book, the lectures that Michael Turvey did for his students, and it was packaged into a book before he passed away. That is, for those that are uninitiated in academia, high level academia, and the ecological approach, not readable. Like
no,
you did no. Yeah,
no.
it's extremely dense. It is like swallowing a dictionary
Mm,
and an encyclopedia at one. Uh, it is very difficult to swallow, but it has so much value that I feel it's
yeah.
worth explaining in some way. Maybe it'll be like a video every 2 pages because that's how dense it is. But if
Mm,
that's it, that's it.
yeah.
So the going back to the activist book, affordance activist, the story that is told, I find probably more compelling than the story told in the other books because the other books are more academic. That is more of a, I guess, a biography,
Yeah.
which I thought about doing for my book. Which, yeah, I definitely have time to write my own book right now.
Oh yeah, yeah, plenty of time. You've got
Uh,
all the time in the world. Yeah.
but yeah, so when it comes to the ecological approach in business,
Mm.
what I think what I think I found, because I've seen a few different papers talking about various things, but what I found is even though it's in sport, it's not really in sport. And even though it's discussed in sport context, it's not really in sport context yet. And ecological dynamics, or the constraints that are applied in ecological dynamics and the framework, that was published like 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And the ecological approach has been discussed quite heavily for the last 20, 25 years by various academics, various coach developers and educators, and it's still only just breaching its way into coach development. It's
Yeah.
not really in any programs. So you're looking at another 5 years at least for the cycle to go through. And so it's going to take probably, my guess, another 10, 15 years for it to get to actual sports coaches, unless they're doing their own reading in their own time. That's 60 years.
Not long.
Yeah. Um,
And then once it's done that, then it has to go through another cycle where it tries to get to us in business, which is
precisely.
probably going to be another 50 years.
Yeah, so finding research in your context, I think, is not possible.
Mm-mm.
So I feel like the activist affordance book is probably the closest to the research you're going to get. It's like a
Yeah.
use case or a case study or a story of someone trying to apply these ideas into that context.
Yeah.
And maybe you are the case study.
Yeah. That was actually in my long list of things to do. Writing a book in that style is exactly what I was thinking.
Well, once you've applied it into into your situation, into your context, maybe then. I mean, obviously, we've discussed how I do it in various ways. I don't know whether you can remember all of those things. I imagine if we had a conversation, you would go, "Oh yeah, I remember you saying that," and "Oh yeah, I
Yeah,
remember this bit."
probably. Yeah.
But asking you to recall it without any context or information, probably not so, because it's not something you've revised multiple times.
No, no.
And so again, it's asking how the ecological approach is applied in certain contexts via the relationship between the person and their context.
Yeah.
Which begs the question, should more books be written about people applying the ecological approach in their situations?
Oh, should there be more books
Applied
on,
books rather than
yeah, than
theoretical.
academic? Oh, that's an interesting question.
Obviously, the academics can't write those books because they won't get published in academic literature
No.
because it's a case study, but they would be pop culture books,
Oh, that's interesting.
which I feel is a nice little segue to
Oh,
the Dr. Mike drama.
oh, okay.
Because for context, for you and for those listening, Dr. Mike is a he has a PhD and he has been on YouTube for many years now talking
Yeah.
about exercise science, sports science.
I think I've seen some of his stuff. Some.
Yeah, he takes drugs, anabolic steroids. He's a bodybuilder. He's very big. Talks about well, building strength, building muscles, fitness to an extent, health as well is related. And his PhD, or when was it? September time. His PhD, someone went through it and said, yeah, it's not very good. It has lots of spelling and grammar mistakes. It has lots of methodological mistakes. It's just not very good. And the video is about an hour 10. So the PhD was put into question. Various back and forths with the YouTube drama space, as I'm sure you can imagine, responses and battles and takedowns and all the rest of it. I'm listening as an interested party, but I'm not sold on either side. And one comment that I think is important to acknowledge is that Mike said his PhD was only a third the academic piece that was critiqued, which relates to the conversation we were just having about sports coaching education, because a third of his PhD was study, which is massive question marks on my side. He does say that the American institutions struggle with lecturing. So essentially, the stuff that I would have done in my undergraduate degree, he did in his first 2 years of his PhD, which to me is like massive red flags. I'm like, I don't understand that. That's not a PhD. That's you doing an undergraduate degree, but calling it a PhD. So big question mark there as to what he meant by academic study. Um, Assuming he's done a 6 year PhD because he said, oh, about a third of my PhD was academic study, going in and being told all of this stuff, which you do in your undergraduate, you don't do in your master's. I didn't do that in my master's. I had maybe 10% academic study. Like we went in once a week for 2 hours. The rest of the week was us doing our own research. That's my master's. And his PhD, which is the level up, is doing lots of these hours of academic study, which is, question mark. Another third was practical. Him being a strength coach and a sports scientist with high performance coaches. I don't know what sport, I don't know what context, but from my experience working with those people is they aren't necessarily well read on the most recent research because they're practitioners. And so in that part of the PhD, he is probably doing VO2 max tests, measuring oxygen intake and cardiovascular system, doing blood lactate tests to measure how well your body responds to fatigue levels, things like that, doing ramp tests, doing loads of other potentially performance analysis tests. So you get a video, you say, oh, you're this angle and that angle. Um, and unless he's spoken to psychologists, that's not covered. And unless he's spoken to skill acquisition specialists, that's not covered. Unless he's spoken to nutritionalists, that's not covered in this practical part of a PhD. Which again, I would beg the question, is that PhD worthy? I don't know. I personally don't think so, unless there is a focused question you're doing your research or you're doing the study around. Because otherwise I could say, I've worked in high performance sport for multiple years. Do I have a PhD in that? I'm not so sure. So that's where I think a lot of the public are saying, oh, well, your PhD was the 2 year, I assume, because split into thirds, this 2 year paper that you've written. But the paper is about fitness components of Division One athletes. And here we get to my point. These three thirds, this academic study about general sports science, this high performance work with academics that I'm going to guess aren't familiar with the ecological approach, doing work with sports science and strength science. And then his PhD paper, which was about fitness components, basically, like does body fat percentage help or decrease Division One athletes? And then he said, when having a conversation with Greg Souders, someone who was discussing the ecological approach applied to BJJ, said, I have a PhD in this stuff. And I'm like, what? You have a PhD in perception and sensation. You have a PhD in behavioral science. You have a PhD in dynamical systems, in coordination, in action, in attention. Like, where is your PhD in this stuff?
Yeah.
And the other conversation that he had with Cal Jones was very similar, and he's asking simplified questions. Oh no, information processing. It's only an information processing. You can only do information processing. We have a homunculus in our head. It's a thing. Everyone knows this. So this person with a big platform on YouTube, 3 million plus subscribers, a PhD, calls himself Dr. Mike. Why he calls himself Dr. Mike, that's a whole other question, whether it was someone else gave it to him or whether he decided to do it. He's called Dr. Mike. It's what he's recognized as. So Doctor, PhD, big platform on YouTube. Then says ecological approach, now that's not a thing. Information processing is the only thing. But hasn't done any research on it. And the research he has done on it, I would question as to whether it is the ecological approach or whether it is traditional sports science.
Which it probably is, because you gotta search. Gotta dig deep to find the ecological stuff.
Yeah.
And if there is a bias to information processing, then they're going to go, is information processing better than ecological psychology? And the beautifully biased results of yes, information processing is so much better, and blah 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 is the only way, and eco blah 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 and blah 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 blah. And there's probably a lot more papers trying to poo-poo eco psych than not.
Yes. The so there is the traditionalists that come from schema theory and part practice that they still believe that is the way that people learn. You have people from other fields where there haven't been practical studies from the ecological approach, so they are still highly skeptical. Like teachers, most educators in other fields really are highly skeptical about how it would apply to more abstract learning subjects such as like maths and English and science. So a lot of their papers aren't pro-ecological, the ecological approach. And then even when you do get into more modern approaches in
Yeah.
cognitive psychology, it's Bayesian brain hypothesis, active inference, which is still not the ecological approach. It is less traditional because it's less schema theory, it's less central executive, and it's more context driven, but it's
Yeah.
still not the ecological approach. And so
And
when he
and they
says, I've
make
read the re
some like one of the things with those other approaches is that they are spending an awful lot of time trying to explain things with a lot of complicated language that can be very easily explained as perception and action,
yeah.
which is far less words, and most people can kind of at least have something to go on from it.
Hmm. Yes. And then when Mike said in one of the conversations, I think it was with Cal, he said, I've read the research and it's incompelling or uncompelling. I wish he'd gone into more detail. Uh, but he then proceeded to say lots of things
Mhm.
that applied to the traditional approaches. Like the study sizes are small. Yeah. The metrics are really constrained. Yeah. Like the significant differences sometimes aren't that significant and are really obvious in their conclusions. I'm like, yeah, so was your PhD. But yes, they were obvious in conclusions because a lot of the papers are looking for single causes because they're not taking the ecological approach to science. They're taking traditional linear causality in science. So they highly constrain the subjects into something that is decontextualized, and then they say whether it works or not, which isn't the ecological approach. It's not how ecological psychologists tend to do their research because they believe in multi-causality and non-obvious causes. So non-linear, distant causes, which begs the question for me, if the ecological approach is going to be discussed online, should it be discussed online by people that have those sorts of platforms and following? Should it be discussed with those people? And that's what I want to
No,
get your thoughts on.
not really. Yes, but in a way that is actually balanced, in a way that someone actually knows what they're talking about, instead of this person who hasn't done any of the work.
It doesn't seem like they have, no.
Like if you don't have an understanding, at least a basic understanding, from what I'm hearing, it doesn't sound like they've even got a basic understanding.
Yes, but isn't that what everyone is that doesn't know about the ecological approach?
True, that is true. I
Because,
think the dangerous part of this is because they have such a big platform, what they say has more gravitas than the actual scientists and the people and the practitioners who are doing the damn work to figure it out.
yep,
And because the scientists are so sciencey, like, and the practitioners just don't get approached in that way, it is very hard to have those discussions because, excuse me, because everything can be retranslated to suit the way that you think. You can just call it different names. It kind of goes back to our conversations a while back. I remember when you were like, well, "What's the point in talking about ecological psychology or the ecological approach? What's the point?" Because if we describe it in actual terms, like you said, case studies, there is that is in many ways more useful because you're actually seeing the approach. Whether they call it this or whether they call it that is irrelevant. It's about, does it help you do the damn thing?
Yep. And that's where I feel the conversations for me are irritating
Mm,
because I mean, in that in that discussion, like I came out with questions because all of these discussions are questions. Like thinking is evolving, dynamic, etc., because we are. And I agreed. I still agree with the previous comments that I made, but having experienced Greg and Cal talk with Mike, I feel like those case study examples end up going back to the fundamental assumptions that are misunderstood.
mm,
Each time there is conflict with the suggestions made, each side try and rationalize why they've made it. And at the moment, I haven't experienced a situation where the two sides trying to rationalize their points of view, the ecological perspective, the person from the ecological approach is familiar with the traditional assumptions. They are
yeah,
familiar with the rationales that they're using, and they listen and go, "Yep, I get that. Here's some limitations. Here's some problems I see with those. That's why I'm over here."
yeah.
But those from the traditional approach don't seem to have wrestled with the ecological approach.
No.
Sometime, well, more often than not, at all, or they claim to have read it, but don't seem to make comments that make sense or follow through with the ideas from the ecological approach. It's like saying, yes, I read direct perception, I know what that is. We perceive something, then we understand it, and we act. Okay, what do you mean by understand? Oh, well, we think about it and then we act. Like that that that's not direct perception. Is there
Mm,
thinking going on? Yes, but it's not a step-by-step process. It's a coupled dynamic directly well, direct process. It happens as you move. And it's like, oh yeah, yeah, I said direct. I'm like saying the word and applying it in a content, in a sentence, in context, where it makes sense is different. Saying,
yeah.
I understand direct perception, and saying, there is no central executive, are great, but what does that look like in a sentence when explaining an experience?
Mm,
I guess that's where I'm hitting a wall with what Mike has been saying in those conversations. I mean, the conversations at the beginning of this year, so like 6, 7 months old now. But the comments didn't follow through. And so
no.
the question I ask is, how do we talk about the ecological approach online? Do we use the buzzwords? Yes, because the buzzwords, whether we like it or not, are the way that the ecological approach describes perception. It is the language of psychology. The language of ecological psychology is perceptions, constraints, affordances, bifurcation, attractors. Like those are the words we use to describe psychology. Similar as
Yeah.
wavelength and height and width for physics. Like, it's the language of ecological psychology. So we need to use the buzzwords.
Mm,
But how do we use the buzzwords when the people trying to use them misrepresent what they mean?
yeah.
Any ideas?
it's very difficult to use the buzzwords. Like from my experience of using the buzzwords, you spend an awful. It's kind of like going back to those conversations we had when we were in Berlin. You have to spend about 4 paragraphs plus explaining the approach before you can start actually talking about that, like what it means and those like case studies and that information. It's the same thing with like the lectures. 19 videos in, we're only just touching affordances. And so everything has to be prefaced with this is the approach we follow. This is why these assumptions don't match what our experience. This is which by that time it's just like, yeah, I don't care. Like, especially in my context, like just people don't care. They just want to know how to do the damn thing. And so you skip it. But
So my
then
que
there is
my question then is, if you didn't have to give the preamble,
mm,
which even cognitive psychologists still need to give a preamble about whatever theory they're talking about because there's so many of them. Uh,
yeah, true.
so if we didn't have to give as much of a preamble, where would that be? In an ideal world, everyone is familiar with the approaches because it's in the education system. As we discussed at the start, that ain't gonna happen. So
No.
where would that be? Because at the moment, it's in a big academic textbook that's sitting to my left, uh, which is not cheap and fairly dense, or in lectures or presentations, again, that are fairly dense with information.
I suppose it's in the people like us who talk about it. It has to be dissected somehow. So it kind of has to exist.
That's my attempt at the moment is like to put the book online so if people do want to know the preamble,
Yeah.
they can go and read or watch the preamble. Um, but there's a lot to it. And it's almost, which is why I've split the video up, almost that when we give a use case, give an explanation, and we use one of those words, it's almost like a top of the funnel. So at the bottom of the funnel, we've got the assumptions and the
Yeah.
preamble. And then at the top of the funnel, we're talking about an experience. So in Mike and Greg's case, or and Cal, Mike, Greg, Cal case, they were talking about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and how to coach BJJ. Like that's the top level. And when someone makes a claim such as, well, if you do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, that's better than just doing it a couple of times in different ways. Well, okay, let's have a conversation about that. What is a rep? Oh, it's just doing the same thing. But you can't do the same thing over and over. Yes, you can. No, you can't. Okay, well, here's what repetition means in the ecological approach. This is how we approach it. And you start going down that funnel. And
Mm,
that's where you get to Bernstein's study. Oh, Bernstein's study, right. Well, how does that apply to constraints in the world? Oh, well, that you need to go a little bit deeper because repetition without repetition, great, that's a thing, that's an observation that we can see. How does that apply to constraints? Well, constraints are things that happen inside of the environment and with the person. So there's person constraints, task constraints, environment constraints. Oh, right, great. But how does that relate to how are you going to like assess this? Oh, well, that's we're changing it from just the organism to the organism and environment. Well, why have you done that? We can see. We just need our eyes. Oh no, that's visual perception. And you go further and further down until you get to the core assumptions.
yeah.
That's how I see it potentially working. But that funnel, I don't think exists outside of academic papers.
No.
And it's certainly not in education at the moment that I have experienced. I mean, you still have bloody learning styles.
No, don't we know it? I've had arguments with the school
Oh, the school is
every
saying, what's his learning style? Oh, that. No. Okay. Is this a head
talking about learning
teacher?
styles, talking about like their lack of understanding of sarcasm due to autism. I'm just like that is such a surface level like definition of autism and the whole thing around like
Sarcasm is one of the things that drives me nuts because There's various reasons, but sarcasm, like anything, is communication.
Yeah.
Communication, like all energy that is detected by an organism, needs to be understood in relation to the context it's in and the experiences of the organisms that have existed. And so, if a person has a different relationship to the communication being mentioned, said, expressed in some way, then it might not come across as sarcastic, but might come across as rude. And
But
the
you
deaf,
have to, so what it was training them to understand it as sarcasm.
but that's not possible. It's not a
No,
thing.
no, I know.
Deaf culture, the sarcasm is like rife in deaf culture because deaf culture obviously is a different language. And
Yeah.
so if I use a sarcastic tone that doesn't exist. They can't hear tone. They can't hear tone. It's not a thing. So the sign, the body language is slightly different. And so sarcasm and how rude you might be varies drastically. And a hearing person, first time in a deaf culture world, may actually think that the conversations are really rude because they're talking about things that the hearing world just don't talk about. You're like, well, no, it's just what they talk about. It's not rude. It's them joking. It's them having fun. It's them being banter. Them being sarcastic about things. And so sarcasm is arguably an affordance. It's a linguistic affordance because there
Mm,
are meanings, and the meaning is in the person, not in the word, in the person, because it's a relational property.
mm.
Oh, I could go on for hours about that, but I'm not going to. So, so bringing it back
Yeah,
a little bit,
I was thinking about that so much because if you think about the traditional autistic experience where two autistic people are talking to each other, it sounds very similar to the deaf experience where they just say exactly what they're thinking and it's fine. Like I have an interaction with a friend of mine who asked every single question about my transition from the beginning. They first met me and they asked me probably the worst, most socially awkward conversation and questions they could. And I'm like, no, you never ever say this usually, but I know where you're coming from already. So you can ask me those really hard questions that most people like most like transgender people have so much trauma around that that to talk about it is really hard. Like it's upsetting for them. But I'm like, yeah, I'll talk about it because I know you're coming at it from approach because I can tell the context of the conversation is pure ignorance and not knowing. And I'm like, cool, I'll answer your question. Like, don't like here is some teaching for you. Don't fucking do that in front of most people. They won't like it. But then the response was, yeah, I know I would never ask this normally, but you seem really chill, like I can. I'm like, yeah, correct.
and that right there, I think, is what the ecological approach brings to society. I know that's a massive claim,
Woo!
but it does. And I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. I think when you grasped how to apply the ecological approach, your interaction with the world changed.
Yes. Yeah, like just even I would go as far as to say my interaction with myself changed. Like the relationship I had to things like burnout, which is just a dumb phrase. Like all of those things, every single thing now is just information for me to use.
I would love to get your, because obviously I've lived it. I've
Yeah.
I've lived sharing
If
the
you
ecological.
ask me questions, great. My problem is because it's my lived experience, I just
Yeah,
do
but
it.
that's a book. That's the biography
Yeah.
book thing.
Yeah.
Because I've lived it. Like I feel like I am almost like the sensei, the teacher in some respects, because I shared the approach with you.
Yeah.
Then we went back and forth and we had some battles. Then you sort of started doing your own research into it because we were talking about it. then you got the book, then we went to Berlin, and then when you saw me in person, I feel like there was a not necessarily a light bulb moment, but there were lots of things that you could observe practically
Yes.
rather than you having to.
The experience was better than the education.
Hmm.
Like educating me, and even when it wasn't until I saw you in person and saw you twice in two different contexts, because I saw you more recently, and like
Oh,
even
right.
just
Yeah.
the relationship there was different. And then it was me noticing how I was different in the different context. And then me taking the experience with you in Berlin, and it came home. And I was like, oh, that's interesting about this, and that's interesting about that, and that's interesting about this thing, and then this thing. Like that was the catalyst, it as you will, for me going, huh, this is different and it works and it's helpful. And all of that shit is gone. I had my 6 month review as part of my like um transition. Um and they were like, so how's things been? Well, I've lost multiple members of my family, blah 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 blah. Oh wow. How do you feel? And I'm fine. Like, I mean, it's hard, yes. It's rough, yes. Oh, do you feel that your transition is up? Yeah, kind of. But also it was, and it wasn't a dismissal of emotions because they've been emotional and it's been hard and like blur. But also I was fine because this is just the situation that was happening. Even to go to the extent of like canceling one of these. I used to send massive huge messages about why. Last time I cancelled, I just cancelled the event on the calendar, and there was no problem at all. And I'm like, cool, this is super easy because it doesn't need the explanation. Because if you cancel, you cancel. It became such a non-thing because this is the we both have calendars. We both know that that works that way, and so we just press cancel, which you've done to me. And it's like, cool, super simple. And Tori was like, "Oh, really? Why did you just did you not?" I'm like, "No, why? Like the event's there. We both know we'll meet next time, so we just press cancel. It's quick. It's simple. Like it's not a thing. It doesn't need to be a thing."
And that is the thing. Like,
Yes, that is the thing, and that like we see that as it is the affordance. It is the we press a button, it's a cat. Ah, cool, won't be there this week. Cool, sweet, awesome. Ah, yes, awesome.
and for explaining that, like explaining those experiences, I think is valuable for people that are not as familiar. And I feel a lot of these things are discussed in self-help books and productivity and things like that, but they're steps to do or things to do. It's not the reasoning behind it isn't explained for me well enough to understand why.
Mm.
Uh, but because the ecological approach goes into perception and sensation, but I'm more interested in the perception element, um, we can then understand behavior, I think, cleaner,
It's something I have been building a an AI bot, which is
as
very
is
popular.
everyone.
Yeah, duh. Um, which takes people through a version of three questions that can kind of inspire that and afford that by constraining it to a tiniest amount. And one of the things that happened when I started using it for myself and was just testing the ever-loving shit out of it was like, oh, it misses all the business context that I would have. And I'm like, cool, okay, here's why I would think about and I shifted recently. I was like, right, I need to write some shit about the business stuff because my approach to how stupid little things like how to like pricing your stuff, like it's so intuitive because now I have the language around that of like, well, it depends on this. These are the things you want to think about as you're going through this approach. Like, this is the environment that you're looking at and the affordances of this versus this, and the constraints of this versus this. And the moment you start, like, I started looking at it, I was like, oh, cool, this is actually quite a lot of business stuff that basically explains why you make the decisions that everyone talks about and also make why you can make different ones.
Yep. When it comes to the um I guess the application and the questions, do
Mm.
you give like a mini lecture to the individuals that do have the questions that are interested, or do you point them to the books and the articles?
I actually point them to you at the moment
Oh.
because they won't read the book. I put them to, so I had a page on my website that was all that was just like introduction to ecological psychology, like introduction to everything, like here. And then I have my Substack, which talks about it in a slightly different way. So I either point them to my Substack or I point them to you.
I
And
was going to
actually,
say
the
because your
Substack
Substack,
also,
I was going to say your Substack seems to be more directed at the people that you work with.
yeah. So something that I'm thinking about now is maybe some of the Substack posts, because I think I did one of these, like where it's the kind of unscripting stuff, which is like unscripting my own relationship with things. I think I might do more of those, like diving into the decisions that I'm making and then why I'm making those decisions, because I think that would be really interesting. Like and start to build up kind of
When you
a
first did it in
bias.
the house, yeah, we discussed this when you first did it in the house, like about moving the
Mm.
plates, um, so that
Yeah,
people
that
could
was a
actually reach
post. I
them.
made that into some content. Yeah. So more of that.
Yeah, nice. I don't think there's anything else I want to discuss. I mean, I'm probably going to do a video on the Greg Cow mic situation because, I mean, to be honest, one views is a big name. Like, there's no point hiding it. Like, he's a guy with fans and recognition. So yeah, I'm going to use his face to market the ecological approach. But also there were some, I think, some misunderstandings I want to go through. And then obviously we've covered the books, Introduction to Ecological Psychology, the activist affordances, and Turvey's lectures on perception. Yeah, and then obviously applying it into practice. Is there anything you wanted to bring today?
No, I think that's everything. I was just excited to chat again.
Yeah, same, same. It's look when I come into this conversation, I'm like, yeah, let's talk, and then I'm like, actually, do we need a topic? I guess we need something to riff on. And then it just whatever I happen to be doing at the time.
Yeah.
Because this is what I'm actively thinking about at the time. So yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks
All
everyone for
right.
listening, and we'll speak to you maybe next week.